Let's dive into today's tech support chaos. Story 1. The mystery of the missing desktop icons. In my years of tech support, I've seen users do some baffling things, but this one takes the cake. A frantic employee called in, claiming all their desktop icons had vanished into thin air. They swore up and down that they hadn't touched a thing. I remotely connected to their computer, and sure enough, the desktop was as empty as a politician's promise. Oddly, the files were all still there in the directories. I checked the usual culprits: view settings, auto-arrange, even the recycle bin. You never know. Everything was in order. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted it, a minuscule speck in the bottom right corner. And, intrigued, I clicked and dragged a selection box over it, and lo and behold, a swarm of microscopic icons appeared. Somehow, the user had managed to select all their desktop icons, resize them to the tiniest possible dimension, and shove them into the corner. After resizing and rearranging the icons to their rightful place, I explained to the user what had happened. They were bewildered and insisted they had no idea how it occurred. Just another day in the trenches of tech support, where the simplest problems often have the quirkiest solutions. I don't want to hang up as it took me so long to join the meeting. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. I lurked here for quite a while for research while I was trying to get into IT. I am now almost a year into an apprenticeship with a great company who pays a proper salary. I have enjoyed all your anecdotes. Anyway, the tale I have is happening right now, and I am trying not laugh. I'm helping a new starter with some MFA over Teams while he is at home, but he struggled to even get on the call in the first place. I think we got the MFA sorted, but there is an issue with opening a shared folder on his personal device, so I asked a colleague to assist. He is free in 20 minutes, but the new starter didn't want to hang up the Teams call, so I muted my mic and turned off my camera. But this guy has left all of his on, including his screen share, and he's there watching the cricket and chatting away with his wife. So glad it's the cricket and not anything else. I have muted him now, but it has really made me chuckle. Story 3. Camera isn't working. Had a ticket from an exec come in because the camera didn't work. Well, actually, looking back, there was several tickets over almost a couple years. Most of them were closed because he just never replied. However, the last ticket resulted in my tech saying it couldn't be fixed remotely and to send a replacement laptop, which was escalated to me to assign. I went ahead and authorized it because it's a senior employee, and his laptop was a whole 2 years old and not box fresh. Laptop returns all come to me so I can make sure they are processed correctly and wiped and sent to a cycle if needed. Laptop had a few scratches but nothing out of the ordinary. Opened it up and saw the issue in a microsecond. The Gorham shutter was closed. Logged in as the local admin and it worked fine. The laptop was shipped to him with it closed, so he never had it working. Note: as the IT director, I never look at tickets unless they are escalated to me for purchasing requests or a senior level request for access, etc. Daily tickets my team can handle fine, and the exec never reached out, which is why I didn't realize he was having issues. Story 4. But I left the door unlocked. This is not my story, but was told to me by a coworker about an hour ago. So a while ago, the maintenance crew put in a wall and a metal/glass sliding door to turn one big room into 2 smaller rooms. As a result, the second room doesn't get much in the way of Wi-Fi signal. To alleviate the problem until a second access point was installed, we opened the sliding door. So the other day, one of the people who work in new room complained about the Wi-Fi signal again. Coworker wanders down there and finds the sliding door was closed again. Yeah, the Wi-Fi sucks because you closed the door. To which the person replied, but I left it unlocked. Story 5. Can I have some DLL files, please? Older dude walks into my office and says, yeah, I was just wondering if you can give me a few DLL files? Late 90s. I had to make sure I heard him correctly. Sorry, you need what? I just need some drills. Which drills would you like? How? Where? What are you gonna do with them? It doesn't matter which ones. I'll just rename them. I wanted to tell him no, just to get back to work, but his request was just too damn intriguing. It's a shame. Sit down, have some coffee, and tell me more about these drills. Dynamic link library. It turns out he has tried to slim down Windows by deleting some files that are not needed and testing to see if it still works. Apparently he had gotten rid of hundreds of megs and still been able to start the OS, but then it started reporting missing drills, so he needed a few to test out. There are many clever self-taught geeks out there. This man was obviously not one of them. He gave me many good laughs though. I hope he has a working PC today. Story 6. A tale of intentional incompetence. So I work IT on a state level. meaning I'm part of the IT department that does support for my state's government offices. The WILEs. One of the areas I specifically handle are Teams phones. Yesterday we got a ticket put in that this office has a Teams desk phone that's not working. They got the phone and account a year ago. Either they never signed in on the phone in all this time, or someone changed the password and never told anyone. Whichever is the answer is anyone's guess, because getting anything from this office is like pulling teeth. But I digress. Me and a coworker tested the account to make sure it was just a password issue. Got a new password set up, tested it on our end to make sure it works, and then we explained the problem to the user, gave her the new password along with the sign-in email, and asked her to test it out. Now, I am a firm believer that no one working an office job is so incompetent they can't sign into a phone when all you have to do is put in an email and password. This lady was intent on proving me wrong, ignored all my attempts through the day and following day to find out if they're having any other issues. It was only about 4 p.m. today that she finally responded, freaking out because she still can't get into the phone and needs someone to come down here for her quickly. We already confirmed the login credentials are correct. We're not sending someone across town just to sign into a phone for someone. So I sent her the phone setup documents, told her, again, how you sign into the phone, and if typing on the phone is difficult, understandable, keypad on the phone is small, easy to do typos, then this is how you sign into the phone via your computer. She still kept freaking out on me because she already has these documents. She needs someone down here so they can use their phone. They pay my agency to do this. They don't. They do not pay my department for support. Don't know why she thinks she's forking over money. And so we should be sending someone down. I gave up. I drove down across town to her office, despite this making me late for my second job as a result. And guess what? The phone signs in just fine. Her issue wasn't that she couldn't sign in. She openly admitted that since we updated the password yesterday, she did not even attempt to sign into the phone, despite us specifically asking her to sign into it to make sure it's working on her end. I wanted to pull my hair out. I came all this way because she literally could not be bothered to sign into the phone herself. Literally all she had to do was tap the sign-in button and type in the email and password we gave her, that's all, but she didn't even want to try. It's just so frustrating, and she kept complaining because somehow this is our fault. Update. I talked to my manager about it this morning. She ain't too thrilled about this either. Apparently this gal has done this sort of shit in the past for other issues. Long story short, closed the ticket out with a note that the issue was that she refused to sign in herself. As per manager, our team will not provide on-site support for her incidents anymore, unless it's genuinely necessary, OFC. Story 7. Over the limit. I've recently quit my job in phone retail where 50% to 75% of my time was usually a glorified tech person. Now have a ton of small and niche stories, including some where I was indeed the bad guy, like the last day I worked with a a-hole customer. However, this is a more positive story that helping my mother out with her phone yesterday made me remember. This takes place, I want to say a few months before I quit, due to sucky cooperate mandates and general frustration with the clientele building after 3 years. A middle-aged woman, maybe around 40s, came in saying her iPhone wasn't working properly, it being dead in the store, as it had been as of late. I said no problem, and took a look. Now, looking at her phone, at first it looked normal, but she said none of the apps were working. Indeed, when I pressed them, they wouldn't respond. The screen movement was also a bit slow. I decided to try the best tech tip I knew when something like this happened. Unresponsive screen. And rebooted the phone. It's happened to me a few times, and usually did the trick, but no. When the phone turned back on, the apps were now just gray squares. That's a new one. Her phone also was running a bit slow, so I decided to check her memory next, finding that the slow response could be from almost full memory. Oh boy, I was right. This lady had her memory of 128 GBs completely filled, but that wasn't the issue. When you look at memory on phones, usually it will tell you what's using how much memory. Her photos were said to be using around 40 GBs. I then looked down to see if she could delete some stuff to help relive that memory, and that's when I saw she had an extra 70 GBs of photos on the phone. I was kind of taken aback, because this was the first time I'd seen this before. Looking back at it, I think her iCloud had backed up the photos onto the phone somehow and jammed it in there. I let her know I personally couldn't do anything about this since she had wanted to keep the photos. I let her know she could either offload it at home with a personal computer or go to the local Best Buy 5 minutes away, and the Apple Care there could help her for a fee. The nearest Apple store was like 2 hours away. She thanked me and soon left. All in all, a good interaction compared to most who came in, and I told them there was nothing I could do. Story 8. Undesirable apps and their problems. This is a tale from the Windows 8 era. My family and I were in the capital for a gaming convention, and my mom had taken her laptop with us. I came back from the convention, to my aunt, *s home, and my mom called me, telling me that her laptop was way slower than before. I asked her what happened, and she said that my cousin installed an IPTV software, was *T against them back then, but keep reading. Now, as soon as I saw the desktop and opened Explorer, I knew exactly where my cousin got the app from, a software aggregator site. Before I continue, that specific software aggregator site was famous for bundling undesired software in their installers. I think you guys here at TFTS know a lot of them. Why I knew? Because the browser was full of toolbars, and the desktop had a lot of undesired software shortcuts, and the homepage had been modified by those apps. To solve that, went to the Program Uninstaller feature in Windows, can't remember how it was called back then, and removed those apps and toolbars one by one. Removed that IPTV app and reinstalled from a source I trusted, the developer's own website, including its online radio feature, it was missing in the previous install I removed. Set up an administrator account with a password and lowered my mother's privileges. Enabled UAC, somehow it was disabled, and installed an AV I trusted, MSE. Told my mom the password, it was her laptop, and logged on the client account, no install privilege, and told her to come to me if someone needed a program to be installed in that laptop. Story 9. Do work for me, but make sure you don't document it, so that I won't have to explain it. In the giant corporation I work for, a change request contains work units, and each work unit is assigned to a team, and then a member of that team. The way it's supposed to work, of course, is that the change request is reviewed and approved by all the teams assigned to do work. In the all-too-common event that a change requires work that was not part of the original request, an additional ticket can be created and attached to the change so that everything is documented. The catch here is that this requires further review after the change is complete. The people who wrote the change request are made to explain what happened and to rework their processes to avoid adding work to changes midstream like this. It's intentionally kind of a pain in the ass to go through this additional review to keep people from bypassing the whole review and approval process. Background. So the other day I am working along and I catch a ticket. In support of ongoing change number 8,675,309, please confirm that this machine is online. I look up the change request by the number, and I see that my team does not have a work unit assigned to us. However, the work is so trivial and so low in risk, never zero, but a gnat's whisker away in this case, that I decide not to attach the ticket to the change. I check the machine, see that it's up and happy, report that fact, and close the ticket. Done and dusted, or so I thought. However, the ticketing system has been abused like this before, so there is apparently a filter that looks for change numbers in the ticket text and automatically attaches them to the referenced changes. On my next workday, I had an angry email from the change requester. They wanted me to detach the ticket from the change request. It was apparently deeply inconvenient that they had to explain themselves to upper management about all this. Of course, they copied my boss and his boss and his boss, which runs me right out of political space to do as they ask. They've just told my senior boss that the policy was followed, so I can't possibly now break policy. I replied, "Sorry, I didn't attach the ticket to the change request. An automated process did, because you wrote, in support of ongoing change number 8,675,309 in the ticket." And anyway, that's how the policy works. If this is work related to your change, then it has to be documented as such. I think the attachment is correct by policy. Please feel free to check with my managers, whom you have already copied on this email thread, if you have additional discussion on the matter. I thought that would kill the issue stone dead, but they doubled down. Don't you know I have to explain this to the Change Review Council now? I was warming up my keyboard to reply when my boss did for me. I've reviewed this, and I agree that Otto is correct here. Any work related to a change should be included in the change request. I didn't hear back after that. Story 10. Naming conventions are important, but the names within them can cause frustration. Many years ago, I worked as a project manager for a company that built our own software as an extension of existing software. Within this role, I had to deal with the developers, sharing the client vision as well as deal with the client, showing their vision in demonstrations. For this story, it is important to note that the naming convention for our servers were based on their primary location, NE, Newcastle, PO, Portsmouth, RD, Richmond, and so on. Late on a Thursday evening, I asked a developer to release the latest version of our software to a test server. The server was called NE Test. The conversation went like this. Me: yes, please release the software on the NE Test server, ready for validation tomorrow morning with the client. Developer: NE Test? Me: yes, NE Test. Developer: okay. The following morning, I wanted to demo the software. I log on to the NE test server, only to find that the latest version of the software is not there. I reach out to the developer, and I ask him where the release is that we discussed the previous evening. Developer: it is on PO test me, but I asked for it to be on NetTest developer. Yes, any test, so I chose PO. Only then did the penny drop for me. NetTest, any test. Not so much a tech support story, but a cautionary tale. Story 11. A tale about cheap tech and lost data. So, my mom was always the person to cheap out on items. Any items. But especially on tech for some reason. Whenever we got something like a phone or tablet, it was the lowest end, lowest spec device. This is also the reason I never played any games more demanding than Minecraft, until I got myself a laptop for my own money. Notably though, she cheaped and still cheaps out on storage devices. First micro SD card she ever bought was for me. It failed after 2 weeks and my data got lost. Obviously, I was the one who had to try and fix it as she didn't have a clue how. As a 6-year-old at the time, I failed to do so. Now it's been many years since then. She stores all her data on cheap pen drives, micro SD cards, and 15-year-old hard drives. For comparison, I, on the other hand, bought a Seagate hard drive and some good quality micro SD cards. Now, all these old micro SD cards and pen drives of hers started corrupting. I went through them a while ago. When I did that, I made backups of both her and mine data, which, though, she doesn't know about. This is not a tech support story yet, but I am pretty sure it will be, as soon as she realizes that all these drives aren't as good as she thought. Over everything she values memories and photos, though buying a good quality device to store them on is obviously not worth it. I hope she will take a lesson out of it through and stops cheaping out on storage that much, even though I don't care that much anymore, as these are her files, not mine. Why the heck am I ranting about this? You have no idea how much data, photos, and progress in games I've lost over the years cause of this. Plus, I am passionate about tech, so she expects that I will be able to fix it if it breaks. Well, yeah, I can fix a broken PC, but data recovery is a different story. Whether I should tell her about the backup, I am still debating on, but I think it will be best to wait until she will want to look at the photos and learns her lesson. Story 12. When a CEO requests for a hard-coded ID to be changed, presumably for an important reason. I had a request in from company CEO to change a fundamental database 2-letter ID to match another analysis field ID. E.g., in one table a thing has the ID of CE, and the corresponding analysis ID in another table has the ID of CD. I understand that request in principle. You'd ideally want these to line up so that you can easily align reporting metrics and keep things generally tidy and easy to follow. In foresight, this would have been a very sensible approach to naming conventions. Here's the problem. These IDs are literally 20 years old at this point. We're talking a company with maybe 15 different branches in different locations, hundreds of staff, terabytes of data, going back decades, millions or tens of millions of records. It predates several company mergers. It affects reporting, automations, validations, all sorts of things. And the reason this IND is a comical 2 letters is because it's basically one of the most fundamental things you would set up in this system before you had any data. The other thing is that this is quite easily solved with sensible coding anyway. The IDs don't need to match, however much you might want them to visually. I asked why he wants to change the prefix, assuming it was something to do with how they need their reporting to function going forward, and he said, "It's just annoying that it's not the same. I want them to be uniform." I'm still figuring out the best way to deal with this one. I know this CEO to be a pedantic ass about stuff like this. I suspect he thinks it's entirely reasonable to have his entire company implode for a couple of weeks just so that he can look at this one 2-letter prefix and feel happier that it looks right. How does one politely say, you may as well ask to realign the foundations of your house because it's a couple of degrees not parallel with the pavement? Hooked on these IT nightmares? Subscribe and never miss a tech support story. Story 13. Internet doesn't work when I turn my computer off. I used to work for tech support for an ISP back in the day. I got a call from a customer that claims their internet would quit working unless their computer was powered on. I verified her other devices were connected via Wi-Fi and confirmed that indeed when her computer was powered off, they were connected to Wi-Fi but would just lose internet. After a bit, I thought to ask her how she was turning off the power to her computer. She stated that she just flipped the switch. It turns out that she flipped the switch on the surge protector that was plugged into her modem and computer. The reason her devices were still connected to Wi-Fi is because they had range extenders throughout the house, so they were still showing as connected. I had to educate her how to properly turn on and off the computer. Story 14. You have to type the password really fast. The title probably gives it away. So years back, there was a network appliance operating over a slightly dodgy Ethernet cable. Why the cable was not simply replaced is lost to time. The person setting it up, not me, noted that some of the traffic gets lost and decided to combat the problem by typing really fast. In particular, they set a long password, which you would normally type with 2 hands, making sure they type really fast. Afterwards, everyone got warned that you have to log in while typing really fast due to packet loss. Sure enough, almost all attempts at typing the password at normal rate would fail. But even when typing really fast, you would get in maybe 1/3 lard of the time. The real reason for auth trouble was that typing really fast resulted in swapping 2 letters, and you had to make the same typo to get in. Story 15. A tale of ignored policy, failed due diligence, and unhinged idioms. So this is another story from my time in cable internet provider call center tech support hell, one that I probably wouldn't share normally since the actual technical side of it isn't that interesting and the ending is fairly anticlimactic. But there's one moment that is just seared into my brain. This story comes from back in June of 2023. Since the events of my previous story, I had moved from second to first shift. This story came fairly late in my shift, after 3 p.m., since the second shift folks were filtering in. This will be relevant later. I get a call, and it's a fairly typical call. Someone who's been having issues with slow internet service who's been calling about it multiple times. Turns out that I'm the 7th or 8th person he's spoken to about this, and basically all of them have blown him off because he's using his own router. Now, I went through my usual troubleshooting procedures to see if there's anything that the last 8 people missed. The detail about 8 people blowing him off because he used his own router gave me a hunch that there was. Because part of our troubleshooting script was bypassing third-party routers to try to verify whether the issue was with the equipment we provided or with the customer's third-party networking equipment. That told me that the last few people were probably just ignoring procedure in favor of trying to get customers off the phone as fast as possible while sending out as few technicians as possible. Everything looked fine in our monitoring tools, so I mentioned that there's one more test that I wanted to run that would require a bit of finagling on his end. Since he had his own router, he seemingly just heard the part about him having his own router, and he immediately went on a rant about how he demanded that we send a technician out immediately, and he wasn't going to put up with me trying to upsell him again like the last 6 or 7 people did. Over the course of this rant, he mentioned that he can't use the routers the ISP rents out because they're missing several security features that are a requirement for any remote work for the defense contractor he works for, brought up the fact that he used to work call center tech support for a different cable internet provider 15 years ago and knows all the tricks, and said the last 2 people he spoke with told him that he had exceeded his data cap and his speeds were throttled because of it, and demanded that we remove the data cap and the throttle. The second is that the ISP I worked for doesn't have data caps. They do for their mobile service, but not their home internet service. Legally, they weren't even allowed to at the time he first started calling in because of an agreement with either the FCC or the FTC in exchange for approval of a large merger 7 years prior, which might give away who I worked for. So I tried to explain to him that we're not throttling his speeds and that we don't have data caps for our home internet service, and this guy's response is, verbatim, "Yeah, and Epstein killed himself." Just sat there in shocked silence for a good minute, just because I knew that if I opened my mouth, the only thing that's going to come out is, "What the actual fuck?" And I wasn't about to say that on a recorded line. Eventually, I regained my composure and somehow got him to actually listen to me. I legitimately don't remember how, and explained that there was one more troubleshooting step I wanted to take that would let us determine whether the source of his issue was an issue with the ISP-provided cable modem, or if it was an issue with his router. All he had to do was disconnect his router and hook up a laptop, a desktop computer, a game console, or something else with an Ethernet port and web browsing capability directly to his modem, and run a speed test. If the result was still less than what he was paying for, I'd set up an appointment for one of our repair technicians to come out. If it was within the range he was paying for, then that meant that his router was in fact the source of the problem. It turns out that the only device he owned with an Ethernet port was his work laptop, which he could not connect directly to his modem thanks to his employer's aforementioned security requirements. Meanwhile, his personal laptop was a MacBook, and his only other device with networking capabilities was his phone. I recommended getting an Ethernet to USB adapter and calling back if the result was still slow, with his MacBook hooked up to the modem via adapter, and he said he was looking for an excuse to get a new personal laptop anyways, and said he would call back if things are still slow, with the new laptop hooked up directly to the modem. As a postscript to the story, I ended up going on my last break of the day right after that call, right as the guy who sat to my right, who worked second shift, was going on his first break. Turns out he had overheard the call, and that he was one of those 6 or 7 people who blew him off and told him to either call his router's manufacturer or switch to the ISP's in-house router. I probably should have lodged a complaint with his supervisor, but unfortunately I did not end up doing that. I also took a look at the customer's account again a month later, and I saw that he still hadn't called back, and it looked like he also had the same modem, so either he gave up on getting his issue fixed, or it was in fact an issue with his router. Story 16. Lucky guess or experience? You be the judge. I had a situation today which caused me a little panic until I was able to think about it clearly. On one of our website servers, there is a fairly strong and sometimes persnickety caching mechanism. It is so persnickety that when we have to make an edit to a page, such as a blog, we have to be sure to make sure we check the page in incognito mode. Otherwise, if we are logged into the CMS and visit the page in regular mode, the update will appear, but it won't appear for others until the cache is cleared. However, I don't know what the cache retention policy is, so usually we just clear the cache after an update and move on. Today, a change was made to a page, and it was passed over to me for my QA review, so I checked it in a new incognito session. The update had been made, and everything was happy, so I reported up the chain that the update had been verified. About 15 minutes later, the account person responsible for that website chatted me and said that she was not seeing the update. She has been bitten with cache issues before, so when she chatted me, she said that she had tried Chrome in both regular and incognito mode, and had also tried Safari. The update was not showing up on any of her browser instances. I had someone else double check for me, and that person was able to see the updates. It was somewhat reminiscent of a problem I had encountered several years ago when I was at another company. In that instance, we had a weird load balancer situation, and a person would get assigned to one of the 2 load balancer URLs. So instead of randomly getting server 1 or server 2, if you were assigned to server 1, it took a random cosmic event of the universe to get you switched over to server 2. Yeah, I know, that's not how load balancers are supposed to work. Don't care, that was about 8 to 10 years ago. Anyway, I knew that was not the issue in this case, because we don't have a load balancer, but something was preventing the user from seeing the updates, even though others could see it. We got on a conference call, and she even showed me that she was starting with a new incognito session. I even had her send me the URL she was using, thinking that maybe there were 2 instances of this page, but with different URLs. Nope, same URL, new incognito session, hard refreshing 2 or 3 times, update still visible. Then, she happened to mention, I even tried it on my phone, and I'm still not seeing the update. Everything is pointing to a stubborn cache somewhere between her and the website. She is about 175 miles away from me under a different ISP, so we definitely are not going through the same intermediate hops. Then I asked her, is your phone going through your home's Wi-Fi? Turns out it was, so she turned off that setting on her phone and hit the page using her phone's data connection. The updates are appearing. How nice. From what I can tell, either her hashtag #WiFi modem thingy has some sort of stubborn cache mechanism, or one of the hops she is going through has the stubborn cache. So, lucky guess or experience? You be the judge. Also, does anyone else have any suggestions on how I can check where the cache mechanism could be located? The user on the other end is not technical, so doing a tracert is not really an option. Story 17. New job role. Mathematician? One from my education tech support days. Two students walk up to the help desk, and I walk out to greet them and ask them what's going on. They told me they were having troubles doing a maths test online, so I get them to open the laptop, log in, and show me what's going on. The website they use to do the tests will gray out the boxes or display an error on screen if the internet drops out or something fails to load. It happens once in a while, so I figured that was the issue. I pull the laptop towards me and type some numbers into the 2 boxes. It works, and they're connected to the internet, so I ask them what the issue is, because as far as I can see, everything is working fine. They proceed to tell me that they didn't know the answer to the question, and neither did their substitute teacher, so they sent the students over to IT for help. They said their normal teacher didn't know the answer either when they were in class the day before, so they've come to us for the answer. I told the kids, this isn't IT related, so I can't help you. I asked who the teacher was, They didn't know, substitute, but I worked it out later on, and send them back. So I guess the school wanted me to add maths wizard to my long list of jobs that aren't my job, like coffee machine repairman, lockpicker, window repairman, and delivery boy. Story 18. They said it worked on Windows 95. Cast your mind back to 1995 when Windows 95 became a thing. This is set in late 95 or early 96, when new computers came exclusively with Win95. I had a customer who had an existing system for inventory, POS, and accounting. It was a DOS-based system and was written in Visual Basic, not Studio or .NET, just Visual Basic. So customer wanted to upgrade computer, an existing system to latest version. I was not a reseller for the system, but they agreed to sell a new version to me. I asked them if it worked under Win95. They assured me 100% it worked. I assumed they had tested it under Win95 after such a definitive statement. I was wrong. They lied. First problem was they wanted customers' details before they sold it to me. I was suspicious, so I gave them his name and my fax and phone number. So then, first problem was, all the data didn't transfer correctly. I rang them, and they asked for a copy of the system. They stated that Windows backup onto floppy disks would be sufficient, so backup was done and airbagged to remote city. Clue 1. A day after they received it, I received a fax addressed to customer with page after page of error messages and a suggestion that customer contact their authorized dealer locally. I rang them and asked politely what restore version they used. They said DOS 6.2. All know why they got errors, don't we? Versions of backup and restore were not compatible between versions of DOS. I asked less politely why they were attempting to throw me under the bus when the mistake was theirs alone. The answer was not really satisfying. We resolved the restore problem, and then they sent a new version of the transfer program, which did transfer correctly. Then the customer attempted to do the end of month on the new system. He sold things, and at the end of every month he ran a summary report of everything he had ever stocked with, on hand, and sales per month columns. He then looked at it on the screen. On his old system, it worked fine. On his new system, it gave out-of-memory errors before it finished the report. It did this even when I quit Win95, and the underlying DOS system showed 640K free. Clue 2. I contacted the supplier of this program, and the help person told me I had to run MemMaker on the system to allow enough RAM for the report to run. Evidently, every report ran in memory and had no spooling capability. I advised them that this was a brand new Win95 system, and as such, did not have an autoexec.bat or config.sys. It also did not use or need MemMaker. The help person told me, trust me, you just need to run MemMaker. I asked them if they had run this program on Win95, and it turned out that they had not. In fact, they had a copy of Win95, but had not installed it. They had plans to install it on one of their own computers at home as well. They had no access to the developers who existed in another country. They had no idea how to fix it, or even to go about finding anything to do. I realized I had been lied to by lying liars who lie. Pants on fire. I had anger issues in those days, especially when people lied to me. I gave them a roasting for being idiots. Unfortunately, I did this in the customer's shop, and I'm sure he heard me call them liars. And worse. I told him that there was no way for me to make his system work for his report without some limit being placed on the number of items selected. In perfect hindsight, perhaps some limit on Vcache in system.ini may have helped, but I had no knowledge of this. In those days, there was not the plethora of websites available with all the knowledge anyone could want. I was never invited back to his shop, and I found out later that the local authorized dealer for that program took over that customer. I have no knowledge if they ever fixed that unpolished piece of. I decided I wanted nothing more to do with them. In hindsight, perhaps I could have questioned them more about their blanket statement that it 100% ran on Win95. Perhaps I could have been more tactful when talking to them on the phone. Part of the problem was that the customer was an hour's drive from me and an hour back, and that the main supplier of this program was 2,000 kilometers away from both of us. I was calling them on my mobile phone, which cost me lots of money in those days, and I had other customers who needed me more. Story 19. That moment when the light bulb finally goes on, when the clouds finally part, the sun shines through and illuminates the wreckage this fool has wrought, and they realize that yes, in fact, you have been warning them about this the whole time, but they didn't listen. Here's a story about that. I've shared a story on this sub before, so I'll give a quick recap what I'm about. One-man IT show. Medium-sized, privately owned retail business. Backwater area. Tech literacy around these parts is worse than average. The relevant IT skill in this story is my proficiency in a certain ERP software. I'm a certified developer and a non-certified but de facto technical consultant for it. Now, probably the most common ask of a developer for this ERP is custom reports. Click a button on a menu, input screen pops up, fill it out and click OK, and the ERP generates a report based on your input. Might be sales, might be purchasing history, might be some fancy cross-reference of projected inventory versus past inventory counts. Enter M, head of sales. M is amiable enough. He is the senior sales rep in the company after all, but he's problematic in that he's a sales guy, solely focused on moving as much product out the door as possible, and absolutely willing to inconvenience others to do so. This guy has a reputation for breaking the rules to get a sale to go through, to the degree that accounts receivable has his user flagged and will double-check his orders to make sure he didn't do anything funny. As my skills with this ERP developed, I learned it all here, on the job. I dedicated quite a bit of time to hunting down the little exploits in the system he had figured out and fixing them. For example, the guy was circumventing customer credit limits and then playing dumb about it. There's some glitch in the system, it just worked. Now, some of you may be wondering how this guy wasn't fired for that last bit, especially once yours truly figured out how he was doing it, and that he was doing it on purpose, without a shadow of a doubt. Seems pretty bad, right? Well, no, the CEO wouldn't fire him because he sells a lot of shit. He gets away with a lot because he sells a lot of shit. As I said in my last post, this place is a clown show. I'm 400 words in and haven't gotten to the point yet. I blame caffeine and not having any work friends. M asked me to take a certain detailed sales report and condense it down into one line. Total sales per department. A perfectly reasonable ask. True. He could pull the detailed report into Excel and in about 7 seconds get his summary with a pivot table. But this is still a reasonable ask, since he might want to look at it a few times per day. Now, best way to go about this is to copy the detailed report's guts and just have the final output summarized. Might not be the most efficient query since there are loads of details getting pulled that ultimately won't get displayed, but working this way guarantees that the reports will be consistent, and I've had problems in the past building things from scratch that didn't agree with existing reports and then needing to hunt down the reason. I coded the report and tested it. Seemed to work just fine. I told M the report was available and he could use it, but to pay attention the first few times he uses it, because I didn't know the exact parameters he uses in the input screen, so he needs to make sure he's running it exactly the way he would run the older detailed report. 3 or 4 months later, he calls me. The report is wrong. What do you mean? I mean, it's showing a number higher than it should. Now, when I run the detailed report, it shows a lower number, and you said they should always match. I did say that. Did you change anything on the input screen? No, just different dates. Did you change anything ever on the input screen? Did you look at it to see what's on there? No. Look at it right now. See the little checkbox with the words, "Don't include drafts" next to it? What does that do? Wearily rub temples. It makes the report not include drafts, M. Exactly as it says, and exactly the way it works on the old detailed report. Oh, I should stress that this wasn't some quaint internal report. He had been reporting sales up the chain this whole time using this report, and didn't heed my warning. He'd paid commissions and bonuses based on it, and had collected bonuses himself based on it. There was a bit of a commotion after this came to light. To his credit, he didn't try to shift the blame to me building the report wrong, but from then on, he did start cross-checking the numbers before making any decisions based on them. He still is a major source of issues. Guy's got a whole bunch of business rules I put in place specifically to deal with his nonsense. As far as management is concerned, if I can block something using the system, then the problem is solved. They have made their peace with this guy's impetuousness. Sorry, no super satisfying, classic Reddit, and everyone clapped comeuppance this time. He fucked up, got embarrassed, everybody sort of shrugged, and were like, yep, classic M, and moved on. Story 20. I click, and nothing. It happened some time ago. I had been working in the IT department of my organization for several years, and it seemed to me that I had seen everything that users had to offer. As it turned out later, I was wrong. One day, when I was assigned to handle the so-called first line of support, I received a call from a lady newly employed in our company who was having problems with starting a program required for work at her position. When I asked what exactly was happening, she replied, I click on the program and it does not start. Since I did not receive any other information that this system, shared across all positions in the organization, had any problems, I asked if double-clicking on the icon displays any message so that I could diagnose whether the problem was hardware or software related. I clicked twice, and nothing. she replied. At that point, however, I wanted to see for myself what was going on. So since every workstation in our company has a program like Help Desk, with which they can connect to IT support and share with us their desktop, basic data such as IP address, etc., I asked her to run it. It doesn't work either, I heard. Okay, I thought. Now I know something more. So I asked, does the cursor move on the screen when you move the mouse? A moment later I heard, yes. When I move mouse, something moves. After another few minutes of conversation, it turned out that the lady was not able to provide any information that would allow me to remotely connect to her computer from my place, apart from the department where she works, which has a large number of workstations. Since the area where our company is located is quite large, each department has its own warehouse with spare equipment. So in order to exhaust all possibilities, I asked her to take a second mouse from it and connect it to the computer. In response, I heard, this is already the second mouse. I thought, oh, so it's something worse. For a moment I was toying with the idea of telling the lady to change the USB port to another one, but in the end I decided that I would go to the place to check what was going on. So I asked her to give me her room number and wait until I came. After some time, I finally got there and found the room she indicated, and the employee was waiting for me. But before I even sat down at the desk, I asked, can you show me how you are trying to start the program? The lady took the mouse and said to me, well, I'm telling you that I'm pointing on an icon and clicking twice and nothing. She did what she said. She pointed on the program icon and then she grabbed the entire mouse and hit it twice on the pad. See? I click and nothing. Yes, I think you are thinking exactly what I was thinking at the time. In her defense, I can only say that she was an older person. The problem went away when I taught the lady how to click correctly. Story 21. MFA would have prevented major fraud, but not before the CFO learned the hard way. Before COVID, I worked for a small business that had been around longer than the internet. The company's IoT setup was, to put it mildly, a mess. Some departments were hanging on to decade-old computers and printers, while others were upgrading to new tech every year. No real rhyme or reason. When I started, I began suggesting ways to reduce costs and increase efficiency, mostly by replacing those 10-plus-year-old machines. But my real battle came when I tried to roll out MFA. At the time, we didn't have a password policy in place. Some employees were using the same password for their personal accounts, email, banks, social media, and work accounts, and never changed it, or even changed it slightly. I made the case for MFA, explaining how it could prevent breaches, especially with the loose password practices. But of course, I was shut down across the board. It's too expensive. CFO. It's too inconvenient. Director of another department. We've been fine without it this long. CEO. Fast forward to the COVID era. One of our business managers reported she wasn't receiving emails from her director. At first, we thought it was just a typical user mistake. Maybe an email rule gone wrong. Something that happens often with users who love organizing their inboxes with lots of subfolders. Digging deeper, we found the root cause. A rule that moved all emails from her director directly to a folder in trash. And then, we discovered something worse. In her sent folder, there were several emails sent to accounts payable. These emails had been doctored to look like legitimate approvals from the director. Approvals for invoices that had never actually been given. During COVID, most of our business and finance teams started working from home. Instead of invoices being sent via inter-office mail, they were now being emailed, and this allowed the fraud to take place. It turned out the bad actors had access to this employee's account for over a year before this all blew up. Once the change to email-based invoicing was made, they used the director's signature from real invoices and copied it onto fraudulent ones, resulting in tens of thousands of dollars in fake payments. The business manager hadn't noticed the missing emails until her director asked about an urgent, time-sensitive matter she hadn't responded to, because the emails had been sitting in trash for months. After the fraud was uncovered, the CFO finally came around. It only took a massive loss to make MFA seem like a really good idea. Now, they're suddenly all about security. But honestly, it felt a little too late. Story 22. Worst user you could imagine threatens a raccoon with roadkill and follows through. One-man IT show for medium-sized business here. Computer repairs, networking, help desk, sysadmin, developer cert for ERP software. I do it all well enough. Seeing as this a privately owned medium-sized business, there really isn't any bureaucracy I can hide behind. So the classic IT no tiki no washi is a constant battle. I track my own tasks using Monday.com and make sure I have written communication when it comes to requests for changes to the system. But a certain user with a lot of power in the organization insisted on calling, always. I'll save a wall of expositional text, by saying this person is difficult to get along with. You'll have to take my word for it, but I can get along with damn near anybody. And after working with this person for a few years, I really wish they'd just go away. A couple weeks ago, she calls me up and immediately starts screaming at me over some issue she claimed I should have dealt with months ago. I did, but she's not tech savvy enough to know the difference between the cloud being down and the power being out, and she's keen on making this somebody else's problem. This is not the first, second, or 12th time she's lost her shit over nonsense, and I am not a tech support punching bag. I hung up on her mid-rant, and then I screened her when she tried to call back. Fuck her influence, let her try to sissy management on me. They know she's a psycho. Her response to this was to text me that I am not to contact her again about anything, ever. What followed was the chillest week I'd had in months. Then the communication started up again because she runs the purchasing department and can't do shit without me. Texts and emails only. Our initial exchange was a little spicy, but after that I thought, fuck it, this is what I wanted in the first place. Let's encourage this. So now I'm getting much more done because I'm not constantly getting interrupted with phone calls that demand my immediate attention. Edit. You're breathtaking. You're all breathtaking. Okay, just for anyone who came here because they're wondering what the hell the raccoon thing is about, the idea is that this lady punished me with exactly what I wanted in the first place, like threatening a raccoon with food. The reason you've never heard of this idiom is because I made it up. Actually, it exists in other languages, just not in English. Story 23. Spider-Man operating system saves computer. I work in a tech repair store, and we've been dealing with a customer who's had his computer in our store for around a month now. So many things have gone wrong with this customer's PC that I can't even list them all, but basically, we fix one thing and another problem pops up. Every time a new problem popped up, we'd call the customer, tell him what's wrong, and give him repair options. Every time now, he's opted to just order a new part himself, bring it in, and have us replace it. We've replaced the GPU, the RAM, the motherboard, the SSD, the power supply, and practically everything at this point. We basically built this guy a brand new computer. It still wouldn't run, would turn on, but no display. The motherboard didn't have an onboard speaker for any kind of beep codes, no onboard LEDs for troubleshooting, nothing, so we were just throwing whatever at the wall to see what would stick. My coworker decided to try his own GPU just to test, nothing. He then tests his own singular RAM stick and huzzah! Ha! Some kind of life. He diagnoses it a bit further, and it's still not working correctly, but it's turning on. He decided to try to test the device. He'd load some random copy of Spider-Man onto the customer's PC just to see how it'd run. The PC was somewhat slow and framey, but it was now working after hard installing Spider-Man onto it. He then attempts to swap the GPU back out to the customer's GPU, still works. He then takes his RAM stick out, still works. Finally, he slowly adds each stick of RAM back into the PC and tests it after each one. It still works. Finally, after all that headache, we have this guy's PC working again, and all it took was for my coworker to install Spider-Man. Now, to test the unthinkable, uninstalling it, he uninstalls it, as to not take up 400 gigabytes on his new SSD, and due to piracy reasons, obviously, and it still works. My coworker basically installed Spider-Man as this man's OS, and it fixed the guy's computer finally. Eat it. Eat it. Okay guys, my coworker didn't literally install Spider-Man as an operating system. The computer wasn't working. He somehow installed Spider-Man on the SSD externally, and it magically started working again. I don't know what to tell you guys. This computer was just cursed. He did everything he could, and it just didn't start working until Spider-Man was installed. Story 24. Flipping out. This will probably be my last post on here for a bit, unless I remember anything else. I have one more big story, but unfortunately that's more about a manager than actual tech support. I was going to originally make this post about a singular incident. However, all these mini-stories have a connecting themes, so I thought I'd mash them all up into a collections of short stories. Working at that store for 3 years as a techie, there was always one type of phone that was always going to have an issue in one way or another, and the worst type of clientele always bought them. That type of phone is flip phones, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I don't just mean your garden variety, cheap plastic flip phones with keypads. Oh no, that'd be too easy. I'm talking about the unfortunate trend that Android companies have started to follow of making those god-awful folding phones. I should know I got one for free while working there. Starting off with why working with cheap keypad flips phones suck. It's in the name. They are cheap and always have issues. In my opinion, In this day and age, if you are able to physically remove the battery of your phone without special tools, then there's going to be issues with it. Story 1. We had this one older gentleman who was a regular. And remember, when I say someone is a regular, that's not a good thing. He was one of those typical, stuck-in-his-ways white old men who wanted nothing to do with the new generation. Anyway, like clockwork, this man would come into the store saying that his phone was acting up. The speaker wasn't working, it was freezing, no one could hear him on the other end of it. So every time we talked to him about going to a smartphone, even a cheap one like the low-grade Samsungs, but no, he would always say he didn't want a smartphone. In total, I'm pretty sure this man had his cheap Alcatel Flip 3 replaced over 7 times, even upgrading it to the TCL Flip, which essentially was the same thing as he had now. After a while, we kept trying to push him to try another phone that wasn't a smartphone, as we were getting sick of him getting more and more agitated when each phone messed up. We tried to talk to him about jitterbugs, those pre-programmed phones, but since we didn't sell it directly, he didn't want to hear about it. I pay you guys so you fix it. He paid $20 a month for talk and text only. Story 2. This next lady came around a lot during my 7th manager's time, and he mainly helped her along with me. Now, to be fair to this lady, she had some issues. Something about a stroke, according to her, gave her really bad memory. And pair that with a cheap flip phone, it didn't mix well. This lady would be in constantly asking for us to fix her phone, or she had pushed some button making it act up. I'm talking multiple times a day for the same problem. And it wasn't like we weren't writing it down for her too. It wouldn't have been such an issue if not for the fact this was when corporate was breathing down our necks about foot traffic to sales metrics. The worst time this happened was when she came in 3 separate times in one day. Both me and my manager helped her. We were putting her cheap flip phone through a warranty, however it was, on a 2-week back order. We had expressly told her this twice in the day. The second time, my manager had actually written down on a large piece of paper for her and given it to her. She, of course, left and came back asking where her phone was and that her phone was still messing up. When my manager explained he had already told her, he said he had written down for her. When she went through her cluttered purse, she had lost the notes he had written for her. So, of course, my manager rewrote everything down while I explained to her for the 3rd time what was happening, and she left. My manager looked at me and said as she left, I hate to be the bad guy, but if she comes back, we are going to have to tell her she can't come back till her new phone comes in. Remember, folks, phone stores are stores first, and tech support second, as sucky as that sounds. Story 3. Now, these next 2 stories are about folding smartphones. This story is from my last month of working there, where this CR*CK head Karen came into my work saying she was there for a warranty on her Moto Razr. Now, Moto Razrs come in a variety, but this was the cheap one with the fake leather. Surprise, surprise, the inner screen had popped up. For those who don't know, it's common for folding smartphone inner screens to pop, which causes damage to the LCDs and black spots to overtake the screen. Sometimes it's covered by warranty, but it depends. Now for the issue. She had done the warranty order through Care, and our store was the unlucky drop-off. Why they couldn't send it straight to her house? Probably, so if she actually broke the phone, then the store could catch it, which is what exactly happened. As I was looking over the phone at first, besides the inner screen, it looked fine. Minutes. Some do, the leather looked like it had been picked at. That was until I double-checked the camera. The small black plate on the back of the phone had a large puncture in it, like someone had taken a screwdriver and pushed it into the screen. Luckily, I was with my awesome supervisor. Remember him? And I showed him. A quiet "ooh" escaped his mouth as we both confirmed this was indeed damage, which means her warranty wasn't eligible anymore. Ma'am, was this here when you talked to Care? What? She snapped at me. No! It happened after. Well, ma'am, we can't take your phone if it's damaged. Essentially, the system won't let us, and it costs US money as individual salesmen. My awesome supervisor basically told her the damage disqualified her from the warranty. She then went on an angry rant how it was just a scratch. It wasn't. You could see a clear crater impact on the camera and spiderweb cracks. She would rub her thumb over it and say, "See, it's already going away!" Long story short, we basically told her no dice, and she started to throw an absolute fit saying she didn't have a phone for work and needed one. We told her we could see her a new phone, but that was about it. And with how bad her credit was, she could only pick cheap ones. Thought that still would be as good as what she had now. She kept throwing a fit and stormed out throwing obscenities at us as she left, before a few minutes later her friend came in. She was much nicer and tired to negotiate us. We told her in no uncertain terms that her friend was banned from the store. We weren't going to deal with her BS, since she had blatantly said she wasn't going to buy anything and had hurled obscenities at us. The friend had seemed to accept this and left only for them to come back 20 minutes later, with the lady coming back in to demand we give her the phone again. This ended with me putting my foot down and telling her to get the hell out, or I'd have the police throw her ass out. Knowing my time at the company was coming to an end soon, I didn't really care what I said. She then stormed out when I actually began to dial 911, and we didn't see her again after that. Immense joy in canceling her warranty for it to be shipped back. And that's all until I remember anything else interesting that counts as IT. I do have some other stories, but they are more retail than direct tech support. Edit. For those defending the first story, I want to clarify that we gave this man options. Over the 2 years he stopped in our shop, we offered him everything from a better flip phones, a Soman Flip, which is built better than the cheap one he had, to very simple smartphones. This man refused everything because he believed he should have a phone for less than $100. We were patient with this man and gave him every option available that we had. We even told him he could get a pre-owned phone for cheaper, but he didn't want a used one. You can't help someone who refuses everything Lifeline given. Story 25. Nobody had any problems with the printer. So, at my work, there was a recent project to replace our aging fleet of printers across the organizations. This was a pretty big undertaking, but we had a good team working on it. After planning out all of the things that would need to happen for the swaps to happen seamlessly, it was decided that we would start by replacing the printer in the IT department. That way, it won't upset anyone else if something goes wrong, it's close by, and everyone in IT knows about the project, so they'll report any issues instead of ignoring them. The new IT printer is set up, and after about a week there's been no issues. Great! We move forward and replace the next printer. Suddenly we're getting a bunch of reports of problems. Nothing about this printer should be any different, so there's a frantic hour or two before someone on the systems team thinks to check the IT printer. Turns out it has the same problems. It's just that nobody in IT ever has any reason to print anything, so it didn't actually get used at all during that week-long testing period. Luckily, the problems were minor and quickly fixed, and the rest of the rollout went fine. But it was an important lesson on the difference between asking, "Does the printer work?" and "Did anyone have any problems with the printer?" Story 26. The tale of the chatbot begins. So we are the internal IT help desk for a megacorp. This year's project from management is to automate the first line of contact. Things that are basically templates. How can I reset my password? And the sort. Boss says it will be easy. We just have to take the tickets and send it over as training data. It has the questions and the answers already. Cue to a few days later when he realizes that the tickets are useless, because no one ever bothers to write eloquent full sentences for anything, especially when the ticket is opened by the user. Because of course they don't. Everyone has better things to waste their time on. Never mind the fact that half the data sources are barely more competent than the users. So he comes up with a new plan. Here is an empty shared Excel file. Everyone start writing user questions and their solutions into it. Now, yes, a dozen or two people are supposed to provide enough training data for a full chatbot, besides their usual tasks. And do it in a form that will actually be useful, so we should somehow predict what sort of nonsense the users would ask, what it actually means, and what the solution is in a way they would understand when the chatbot sends it to them. Oh, this will be a fun year. Story 27. My keyboard is too slow. I had a user once complain about her wired keyboard being too slow when typing. I figured it was some type of lag problem or other easily fixed performance problem. When I investigated, the user demonstrated the concern, but the keyboard was typing normal and there was no problem. The typing speed and all other settings were set properly, and the user had never customized anything. Frankly, I was at a loss since I couldn't fix something that wasn't broken. Then I had an idea. I told the user I would be right back. I went and got a new keyboard, exactly the same as the one being used. I went to the user and told her I figured out the problem. She was using a 100 MHz keyboard, and I brought her a 300 MHz keyboard. Yes, I was lying through my teeth. When I had her try it out, she was immediately happy and was glad I solved the problem. The keyboard speed was the same as the one I replaced. This was the only time I ever flat out lied to a user, but I also knew the user was kind of a prima donna and needed some type of proof that her problem was being addressed. Story 28. Linear time is hard. I was recently promoted to head of IT for a small law firm, meaning I'm a paralegal who is 10% better with computers than the attorneys I work with, so they think I'm a tech god. Don't worry, it came with a good raise in pay and lowering of required billed hours. To teeth. We recently started offering mediations as a service, and, it being 2025, we do many of these mediations, and the meetings to prep for them, over Zoom, using fancy conference equipment. My office is right next to the conference rooms, where the calls take place, so I can help out as quickly as possible if needed. As this is a new service that the firm really wants to work out, anything involved in this is top priority. At 9:55 a.m., the judge hosting a meeting comes running to my office, saying the meeting isn't working. I run in after him and find the camera working fine, the little fancy conference tablet working perfectly, and the TV displaying with no issue. I ask him what the issue is, and he says, "There's no one in the meeting yet. It isn't working." I ask him when the meeting is scheduled for, and just as he finishes saying 10 a.m., the first guest joins the meeting at 9:57. He thought the conference equipment wasn't working because his clients were 3 minutes early, not 5. I'm new to this. It gets easier, right? The IT chaos never ends. Hit subscribe and stay tuned for more tech support madness.